I hope you had a good first day at Nexus yesterday. My name is Ethan Pierce. I'm the founder of Borderless Ventures, and I have the pleasure of getting to do like 80 of these things a year and meet amazing people on stage, like our fantastic next guests that are going to come out and have a very interesting conversation about Coinbase's vision for the future, crypto's European frontier. This forward-looking fireside chat will delve into the evolving regulatory landscape, innovation in the crypto space, and how Coinbase is positioning itself to shape the future of digital finance across the continent. In a conversation exploring Coinbase's strategic ambitions across Europe with Paperjam's chief editor, Thierry Labro, please welcome to the stage VP and Managing Director EMEA at Coinbase, Daniel Seifert. Please give them a huge round of applause to welcome them to the stage. Oh, that's a very good round of applause. I like that. Gentlemen.
Thank you. So, good morning, everybody. Thank you to join for this session. I think we're going to have a warm day today, so it's the right moment to assist to this fireside chat with calm ambience. Daniel, thank you to join to talk about the future development of your company and how you see the market in Europe. Maybe you know the Coinbase became a buzzword since a few days because we are all expecting the MiCA license that you could get in the very next future. Yesterday, back in April, you give a very interesting interview to the Big Well about the situation. And what I noticed is that in the strategy that you presented, there was not even a mention of Luxembourg. So was that a strategic silence or an oversight?
Jerry, good morning. First
good morning.
And Luxembourg, good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here and such a pleasure to be welcomed in this way. I mean, Luxembourg is a fantastic place to do business. Europe is a fantastic place to do business. We're all in on Europe. And I think, you know, we've said this many times, right? We've been investing for many, many years in Europe right now. We think the potential for Europe for crypto adoption and to drive crypto adoption globally also through Europe is exceptional, really. As you already alluded to, Europe was really leading the way with its MiCA regulation. And the MiCA regulation, you know, sort of, that journey started really very, very early. Because it was sort of a very early reaction to the, you know, Facebook's plans at the time of Libre Diem, and then, you know, kind of like being translated into law and sort of working its way through European regulations. And I think the regulatory clarity that we've gotten in Europe is exceptional. I think, you know, for a very, very long time, we didn't have that in the US, we didn't have that in any other continents, and quite frankly, you know, other continents were also looking towards Europe and sort of learning from Europe and seeing what good things were happening in Europe. And now that we have that regulatory clarity, right, we're very, very happy to be driving crypto adoption here from the heart of Europe.
Just one word about Luxembourg, because we already are in Luxembourg, and when you are in the ecosystem, you can ask yourself, do the politicians take the right decision? How is the regulatory framework? Is it adapted to business development from main crypto actors? Could you share your analysis of the regulatory framework in Luxembourg? I think about blockchain law and things like this. Could you elaborate a bit on this? What is your analysis about the framework?
No, it's a great question. Thank you, Thierry. Right, and I think, you know, with anything, you know, when you're sort of a first mover, right, there will be a lot of things that you will get right. There will be a lot of, you know, some things maybe you know, you can take a second look at. Maybe let's just call it like that. I think, you know, interestingly, when we look towards the, you know, a bit the international global comparison, when we look to the United States actually passing now frameworks that are very similar to MiCA. You know, Genius Act, I think, just passed the Senate yesterday. When we speak or when we look at what the regulation in the UK is doing, there's sort of they're thinking about in a kind of third mover advantage type of thing, right? So they're looking very eagerly to what's happening in Europe. They're looking very eagerly what's happening in the United States. And then they're sort of, you know, tweaking around the edges. And I think, you know, with all due respect, but, you know, in some instances, I would say the MiCA regulation has some, let's call it, challenging elements, right? We've seen in the last years, we've really seen the explosive growth of real-world assets, of tokenization, of stable coins. Right? Just last year, there was more than $30 trillion being transacted in stablecoin volume. This is phenomenal, right? It's just for reference, it's like 10 times as large as the whole crypto market or crypto volume in total. And especially when it comes to stablecoins, I think the MiCA regime is a little bit challenging, if we may say so, right? So some of the stipulations, for example, the non-ability to pay interest on stablecoins and so forth, right? And I think Europe just has to be careful, like to continue this lead that it has established, but not to risk falling behind. I think that's really the risk for me at this stage, right? That we continue to push the envelope, we continue to push forward, but not fall behind now, right? And those small areas where we think we can be even more innovative, we should push on them.
That's a message that your company is delivering regularly. Huh? I've read it many times around this. No, but just to come back to MiCA, because finally MiCA is live. That's something interesting for European continent around crypto and digital assets. In concrete terms, how will you participate to this? What kind of product will you deliver? Okay, we understand that the license will arrive to a certain point, that it will take probably a few months more to come. But what will you deliver for product? What do you want to achieve in Europe thanks to this regulation?
No, thank you, Thierry. And I might just recap just a little bit. Really, I think there was a realization in Coinbase at some stage, and Coinbase's mission is to increase economic freedom worldwide, globally, right? And I think there was a realization that, our domestic market is the United States, but it's only 4% of the population, really, like globally, right? So if you want to live up to your mission of increasing economic freedom globally, you really have to go outside of the United States. You have to do this, in the rest of the world. And we started to invest, and this was a journey that really started to deepen. And 3-4 years ago, we started to invest really strongly, heavily outside of the United States. Started to build up the regions, started to build up the countries, hired country teams, and so forth. And that is a journey that has continued over the last 2 years. We've increasingly brought, we now have local engineering teams. We call them country pods, and we're increasingly localizing the product, making sure it kind of works for the local consumer, is easy to use, is very convenient to use. And to your question about MiCA and the regulatory framework, not only does MiCA give us the possibility, and as it does for any competitor really, right, to serve these 27 member states under one unified regulatory framework, but I think it actually, the more important element, it gives us the confidence to continue to invest in Europe and to deeply localize the product.
How do you see the situation with US? So your company was first based in US, developing in US, and then suddenly understood that you also have to work with Europe. How do you see the situation? Is that Europe vs US, or are both dynamics complementary in a way? How do you imagine the future dynamics between both sides of the ocean?
Again, fascinating question, Thierry, and I think we've, even just over my short lifetime, we've seen quite a bit of change in that regard, right? I think I was sort of, when we started, there was a very, at least from a European angle, was a very transatlanticist view, right? And I think, very recently we've seen maybe a little bit more of a decoupling or more tensions, maybe call it like that, right? But the interesting thing is, I think, on the business side of things and the regulation, what the consumers want and the demand, it's actually fairly similar. So this is very interesting. And I think then too, what the regulation then is kind of following, and that makes sense. Again, it's very similar, and sort of the different markets and authorities, they're sort of looking to each other and seeing what are each other doing, and they're actually harmonizing.
In this area, it's almost a question of trust. You have to give trust to your customer, detailed customer, and to corporate customer also. So in this, I imagine in this area, regulation be compliant. That's the case of your company. For years, you managed to get license in Germany, in London, in Dublin, anywhere. That means that regulatory question are an advantage, a concurrential advantage for your company? How do you see that?
No, absolutely right. What you just said, Thierry. Right. I think our sort of self-understanding, or like the way we think about the companies, we want to be the most trusted and safest place for customers to use crypto. Right. To learn about crypto, to adopt crypto, to really benefit and gain from crypto. Right. And this is maybe maybe in the near term that sometimes can be a bit more of a challenging decision, right, and more difficult, right? I think, but over the long run, it really, really pays out, right? And we've seen this time and again. And Coinbase is very much one of the very first exchanges ever that was founded for crypto, right? And it's still around and it's going from strength to strength. It's actually the only major one that's listed on a U.S. stock exchange. It's recently been included in the S&P 500. Again, like another huge validation, right, for the company and its strategy. And yeah, I mean, there may be, let's say, short-term challenges, but I think in the long run, it's fundamentally the right thing that we want to do.
Trust brings us directly to stablecoin, for example. I was lucky enough yesterday to spend half an hour with Brian, but I also spent time with other players that say in Europe you don't go fast enough with the stablecoin question. And if you are interested in crypto world these last days, we can also see other players that say stablecoins, that's nothing, you shouldn't engage too much in stablecoins. What should we do? Engage in stablecoins or wait for the true trend in the market? Let's say like this.
I love it, right? I mean, stablecoins have seen such a moment. Last year definitely, but also like over the few years prior. And I already mentioned one of the statistics, right? That real world assets or tokenization has grown more than 200-fold over the last 5 years. And I think that, there's a lot of growth statistics, but that's one that really stands out, right? And there's been more than 30 trillion of volume in stablecoins last year. I think what's important to recognize, and what I would say to everybody is, stablecoins are really the only existing asset that is able for settlement on-chain or on a blockchain, right? And so I think, while it's very interesting to have a lot of theoretical discussion and academic discussion about what else could be out there, and we should always discuss and we should always innovate and try, right? That is the only thing that works. And I think it's proven very well that it works, and it works very well in practice. So I think for us, this is definitely the future.
And what about central bank currencies?
Yeah, again, right? I think then, and I still remember, almost like 10 years back, right? There was a lot of discussion about central bank digital currencies. And look, now it's 10 years later, and you see how much progress we've seen, right? Now, I don't think, as a company, we're not saying there can be only stable coins, right? We can certainly envision a future where there would be a mix. But again, the only thing that exists in practice and that works in practice are private sector stablecoins.
Other topic very interesting, I think, about your company is the launch of X402 protocol related to open source on one side, and related to the future of payments of the other side. Maybe because on this side of Europe, it's not so well mediatized, and on the other side, could you explain us why it's important for your company and where you want to go with this development?
Yeah, so no, again, like fantastic example, right, of the innovation that's happening, and some of it is maybe not so readily apparent to everybody, right? So yeah, it's good to spend a moment on it. One of the things, obviously, about Coinbase, I was saying, we were founded more than 10 years ago, right? I think, and Brian Armstrong, he was here and speaking to us yesterday. Coinbase, we sort of onboarded the first 1 million of customers. Yeah, okay, great, we can do this, right? Then we onboarded 10 million of customers. Okay, great, we can do this, right? Then again, we went further and further and further, right? And currently, again, back to this mission of increasing economic freedom that I mentioned earlier on, right now, we've really set our side, or our kind of internal ambition is to onboard or bring 1 billion people into crypto. That's the current ambition, right? And I think there was a realization in the company that you can't just sort of onboard 1 billion people yourself. Really, probably the fastest way to do this is through an ecosystem. And that's when we started our efforts to be building tools, protocols, and so forth for outside use. So to enable startups, to enable third parties, to be actually building on these tools and to be growing adoption faster. And this was really the driving motivation behind that. And so that I mean, among other things, kind of that, that led to the development of this sort of internet native payment protocol. And the idea really here is like, I think if you were, you're going to spend your summer holiday and you're going to go to Italy, I don't think you expect to download the Italian browser to be surfing the web, right? Like, you're going to be using the same one. And this is very much the same thing about the 402 protocol, which is, it had actually already, I think in the 90s, been set up as a, one of the protocol layers that were delivering or meant for payments, but even in the 90s, we didn't have a payment method that was ripe for the internet, right? And nowadays with crypto and blockchain, we really have it, right? This is the one unified global method for payments that is borderless, that is frictionless, it's sub-second, it's sub-cent, and you're going to see incredible growth.
It's a very good way to finish this conversation because the time is flowing. Thank you very much for this interesting conversation, and good luck for the next steps and months with this development anywhere.
Thank you, Thierry.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention.